I arrived early, earlier than I probably should have. The folding tables under the white canopy were still mostly empty, a few pastel decorations fluttering lazily in the breeze. I set the tray down carefully, pink frosted cupcakes, each one, topped with a little white sugar flower. I had piped them by hand that morning, just like I used to for her birthdays. I thought maybe they'd remind her of being 8, standing on a chair in the kitchen, laughing while licking frosting off her fingers. I straightened the napkins on the table, smoothing out creases with shaky hands. My fingers wouldn't stop trembling. I told myself it was the breeze, but it wasn't. The spring air was warm, soft, the kind that carries the scent of grass clippings and sweet things. But inside me, there was a chill, a quiet kind, the kind that settles into your ribs when you're trying too hard to belong. The canopy cast soft shadows across the grass. A couple of guests began to arrive, chatting easily, laughing like this was just another happy day. I forced a smile and stepped back, my heart tucked away behind pink cupcakes and quiet hope. It happened fast. One sharp sentence, said too loudly, to be brushed off as anything else. "Why are you even here?" Her voice sliced clean through the laughter, through the breeze, through the tiny conversations happening all around us. The music didn't stop playing, but everything else did. My breath caught. It felt like the sun blinked behind a cloud, though the sky hadn't changed. I felt eyes on me. Curious ones, embarrassed ones. A woman near the drinks table paused with a ladle halfway into the punch bowl. Someone else coughed and looked away. No one stepped in. No one laughed it off. My hand instinctively gripped the gift bag tighter, the one with the hand-knit booties inside, wrapped in tissue I'd fluffed and folded just right. The ribbon I had tied that morning, soft pink, satiny, now looked loud. Silly. Like a flag I should have known better than to carry. I stood still, pretending I hadn't heard her. But I had. Every syllable landed, sharp and cold. In my hands were the booties I had made weeks ago. Tiny and soft, just big enough for a baby who hadn't yet met the world. Each stitch was done late at night while the house was quiet. My fingers slow but sure, my heart full of something like hope, or maybe longing. It's hard to tell the difference sometimes. I'd imagined her opening them. I had pictured her, eyes lighting up, maybe saying something like, "You remembered." I had even imagined holding them together, laughing at how small they looked. I thought it might be a moment, a tiny bridge between us. But now I just stood there, gift still in my hand, unopened, invisible. She had moved on to someone else, talking, laughing. I was still stuck in that space, holding something gentle while everything around me felt sharp. A breeze lifted the edge of the tissue paper in the bag. It fluttered once, then again, like it was ready to leave. I didn't cry. Not then. But something in me folded quietly, the way paper does when it's damp. Nobody said anything. Not a word. A woman near the punch bowl looked up, caught my eyes, for a split second, then lowered hers to the ground like she was suddenly very interested in her shoes. I don't blame her. Most people don't know what to do with someone else's ache when it shows up uninvited. I stood there, cheeks flushed, not from shame, but from something worse. That feeling of being invisible in a room you helped build. I wasn't angry, not exactly. I just floated, untethered, like I had drifted a little too far from the shore and forgotten how to swim. There was laughter somewhere else, children playing near the fence maybe. But it sounded far off, like it didn't belong to the same day. A helium. Balloon had come loose from the gift table, and I watched it rise, slow and steady, until it disappeared behind the clouds. No one noticed it drifting away, except me. She smiled plenty, for the guests, for the pictures, for her in-laws who brought a diaper cake and jokes about midnight feedings. She laughed when someone spilled the punch and posed, hand on belly, like a magazine ad. She looked radiant, like someone who had everything she needed right in front of her. She just never looked at me. I watched from a folding chair tucked near the hydrangeas. They were blooming, heavy, and full, those blue and lavender clusters she used to pick for. Me in spring, back when she still called me Mama, and tucked her hand in mine just because. I watched her like a stranger would. And it hurt. Not the sharp, sudden kind of hurt, but the quiet, deep ache that lingers, the kind that doesn't beg to be noticed. I kept smiling when others passed by, nodding politely. But inside, I was watching the girl I once raised become someone I couldn't quite reach anymore. And still, I loved her. That part never left. That part never will. The kitchen table was a mess, markers uncapped, glitter stuck to everything, a crust of jelly on the corner of her cheek. She stood, on her tiptoes, holding the card up to me like it was a masterpiece, and to her, it was. Look, Mama, I made it just for you. The words, "Best Mom Ever," were scribbled in shaky crayon, hearts cut out with safety scissors glued at all angles. One heart had a smudge from her peanut butter sandwich. I knelt down beside her, smiling so wide my cheeks ached. "You like it?" she asked, eyes wide and bright, sticky fingers brushing my arm. "I love it, baby," I whispered, pulling her into a hug. She smelled like strawberry jelly and that lavender lotion we both liked, the kind that left a soft shimmer on her skin. The fan hummed above us, stirring the warm evening air. Outside, a dog barked in the distance. Inside, it was just us and her card, and the kind of love that makes everything else small. I believed her that day. I believed I was the best mom. Didn't know how short that window would be, how quickly things would shift. But for that moment, I truly was hers. The city always felt different at night. Quieter, slower, like it took smaller breaths. I'd get home late from work, tied down to my bones, but I never missed bedtime. She'd be there waiting, blanket tucked under her chin, a book already picked out and held close to her chest. "Read this one," she'd whisper, handing it to us. Me with sleepy hands. I'd sink into the mattress beside her, the sheets warm with her little body heat. The lamp cast a soft pool of gold across the pages, and I'd read, voice thick with exhaustion, but steady. Sometimes the words are blurred. Once or twice, I dozed mid-sentence, only to be nudged gently by her tiny elbow. "Keep going, Mama," she'd say, barely awakening herself. Her head always found the crook of my arm. Her breathing slowed until it matched the rhythm of the story. Outside, a siren might wail faintly. Inside, peace hummed like a lullaby. That was our ritual, our rhythm. In those nights, love wasn't loud or showy. It was the warmth of breath against my skin and the soft rustle of turning pages. She had these rainbow socks she loved, slippery things that made dancing a little dangerous on the tile floor. But that never stopped her. We'd slip them over our hands and turn them into puppets, giving them ridiculous voices and names like Mr. Wiggly Toes and Captain Crumbs. I'd turn up the scratchy little radio on top of the fridge, and we'd spin across the living room. She'd laugh so loud, I was sure the neighbors would complain. But they never did. Maybe they were listening too. That apartment was tiny, and nothing in it matched. The couch was secondhand. The coffee table had a leg, propped up by an old book. But none of that mattered. Not to her, not to me. We didn't have much, but what we did have was real. Joy came easy back then, honest and full. The kind of joy that doesn't know it's supposed to be careful. I wish I'd bottled that sound. Her, giggle bouncing off the walls. I wish I'd held on to it harder, longer, because I didn't know those days were already fading into memory while we were living them. I keep trying to find the moment, the exact day, the exact breath, when the distance between us started to grow, but I can't. It wasn't a single slammed door. It wasn't one missed dance recital. It wasn't even forgetting to sign the field trip form. It was smaller than that, quieter, like something shifting under the floorboards. A creak I didn't notice at first. Maybe it started with a sigh instead of a smile, or when she began saying, "It's fine," when I asked if something was wrong. The clock on the wall ticked louder those days, or maybe I just started listening. More. I'd sit at the kitchen table while she stayed in her room, headphones on, laughter replaced by silence. Outside, the world went on, car doors slamming, neighbors arguing over trash bins. Inside, something had already changed. I just didn't know how deep the cracks had gone until I tripped over one and realized I couldn't reach her anymore. She used to run to me when I walked in the door. No matter what time it was, no matter how tired I looked, her eyes would light up like she'd been waiting just for me. But one day, they didn't. She still said hi, still cleared her dishes, still brushed her teeth and turned in homework on time. But the spark was gone. Her eyes met mine, but they didn't linger. Like looking at me didn't feel like home anymore. I watched her one evening, sitting by the window, headphones on. She stared outside, her food untouched on the plate beside her. "You okay, sweetheart?" I asked. She didn't hear me, or maybe she did and didn't want to answer. The kitchen light cast a soft glow on the counter. The sink dripped. An old photo of us was still taped to the fridge, me holding her. Her face lit up with cake frosting and joy. I stood there, suddenly unsure where I belonged. Some nights I sit with a cup of tea that goes cold before I remember to sip it. The lamp hums quietly. The rest of the apartment is dark. I think about those puppet shows, the bedtime stories, that glitter-covered card with crooked hearts and sticky fingers. I wonder, does she remember any of it? Do those moments live somewhere inside her now, tucked behind the anger, behind the years? Or have they vanished completely, wiped clean by time and pain? Because I still carry them. In the way I fold towels the way she used to like. In the bend of my voice when I say her name. In the drawer where I keep the tiny sock puppet she made in second grade. I don't know if she remembers. I don't know if she ever will, but I do. And some nights, remembering is enough to make me smile, and then ache, all at once. The roses weren't expensive. Grocery store leftovers mostly. A few petals bruised at the edges, wrapped in yesterday's paper and tied with twine I found in the junk drawer. Still, I carried them like they were gold. I wanted her to know I came, that I was proud, that no matter what had passed between us, I still showed up. The campus lawn buzzed with laughter and bright dresses and shiny shoes sinking into the grass. I walked carefully, afraid the bouquet would wilt from how tightly I held it. My palms were damp. My fingers shook. "Excuse me," I whispered more than once, weaving through strangers and strollers and balloon strings. I searched every cap and gown, every flash of long dark hair until I spotted her. My smile was already there, waiting, soft, hopeful. The kind you leave on like a porch light, just in case someone wants to come home. She was surrounded by people, friends, classmates, arms linked, eyes shining. A professor with a robe and a crooked cap posed beside her, holding up a diploma with pride. She laughed. She looked happy. I stood just a few steps back, close enough to see her face clearly, far enough to be out of the pictures. She didn't look my way. Not once. I shifted my weight from foot to foot, unsure if I should wave or wait. But every time her eyes scanned the crowd, they seemed to skip right over me. I felt the roses growing heavy. The stems had started to sweat against the newspaper. And somewhere inside me, something wilted too, quietly, like it had been expecting. This. I had imagined today differently. I had imagined pride shared, not swallowed. But there I stood, a mother in the wings, watching her child smile for everyone else. They began calling names over the speaker, last names and middle names, and applause that came in waves then died down. She crossed the stage to cheers and phone cameras. I clapped, of course I did. My palms hit together hard enough to sting. Afterward, everyone hugged everyone. Her roommate's mother gave her a locket. Her advisor cried. Her father's side, who hadn't raised her, showed up with matching shirts and a bouquet twice the size of mine. She thanked them all. "I couldn't have done this without you," she said, looking right into her stepmother's eyes. She didn't look at me. Not once. No mention, no glance, nothing. I kept clapping, even when the moment had passed. My hands hurt, but it wasn't from applause. It was from holding in every word I wanted to say, every version of "I'm proud" that never got invited to speak. I was walking back toward the parking lot, not looking for anything, just trying to breathe, trying not to crumble where anyone could see me. And then I heard her voice. "I survived my childhood," she said, clear, sharp. I slowed down. Her back was to me. She sat on a bench under a tree, her gown pooled around her knees. Her friend nodded beside her, distracted, sipping something from a plastic cup. "Seriously," my daughter added. "It wasn't easy, but I made it out. Made it out." I stopped walking. The wind shifted and pushed her words right into my chest. Thought I was her anchor. I thought I was her soft place to land. I thought I had given her love, even if it was tired, even if it was clumsy. Turns out, I was what she had to survive. That sentence did what years of silence hadn't. It broke. Something in me. I found a bench under a flowering tree, the kind with petals that look like crumpled paper before they fall. I sat down slowly, the bouquet still in my lap. The roses had begun to brown at the edges, the way they do when the water's been gone too long. My back aches from standing, but it was my heart that hurt more. I stared at the blossoms above me and remembered the nights I rocked her through the flu, the times I packed school lunches in the dark before my shift, the way I stayed up to sew her dance costume, even after a 12-hour day, and still, none of it made her list of thanks. The petals began to fall around me, soft and slow. The breeze picked them up like it knew something I didn't. I sat there, with wilted roses and memories no one wanted. She walked away, her gown trailing behind like the closing curtain of a show I was never asked to watch. I stood still, not ready to move, not ready to let the moment pass. Just once, I wanted her to turn around, to glance over her shoulder, to see me there and smile maybe, or nod, something, but she didn't. The crowd thinned. A few kids laughed somewhere behind me. The program I'd folded in my purse rustled in the breeze. Even the birds seemed quieter now. I didn't cry. Not yet. That would come later, when the noise was gone and the seatbelt clicked into place and the roses finally gave up. When I was alone with the silence she left behind. The rain had started around noon, slow at first, just a whisper against the windows. By late afternoon, it had found its rhythm, tapping like tired fingers, steady but soft. I stood in the doorway, with a mug of tea that had gone cold long before I realized I wasn't drinking it. She was curled up on the couch, knees drawn in, arms crossed like armor. Not just against the chill, but against me. The cinnamon candle flickered low on the shelf behind her, the scent barely cutting through the musty damp that had crept in with the storm. I didn't say anything at first. I just watched her. The way her jaw set, the way her eyes stayed on, a spot that wasn't me. The distance between us wasn't much, not physically, but I could feel the years stacked between us, like books we'd never read together. And I knew tonight I had to tell her. "I need to say something," I whispered. She didn't answer, but her shoulders stiffened just enough to let me know she heard. I sat down slowly, setting the mug on the coffee table beside the half-burned candle. The rain picked up, louder now, blurring the view outside like the world had disappeared. "Your father didn't die," I said. "He left." Silence. I waited for her to yell, to cry, to ask why or when or how could you, but she didn't. She just looked at me, eyes wide at first, then smaller, harder. Then she blinked, and in that blink, something behind them went dim. It was like watching a door close in slow motion. I thought telling her would be the worst part. But no, the worst part was realizing I had just lost her again. He left us, and now so had she. You lied, she said. Her voice wasn't raised. It didn't need to be. I was trying. I started. To what? Protect me? From my own life? I opened my mouth again, but the words tangled. My voice cracked before anything clear could make it out. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall, louder than it had all day. The couch creaked beneath her weight as she leaned forward, her jaw tight, her eyes locked onto mine. I made peace with him being gone, she said. I grieved him, built my childhood around that loss. But you— Her breath caught for just a second. You made it all fiction. I saw her then. Not the grown woman in front of me, but the little girl who once asked if her daddy would have liked her drawing, and I realized she was rewriting her whole past at this very moment, and I was the villain now. I did it because you were so young, I said softly. I thought if you knew he walked away from us, it would break something in you. She didn't flinch, didn't interrupt, just stared. I didn't want you to feel unloved. I told myself I was protecting you. I reached for understanding, for mercy. But the words sounded smaller out loud, like pebbles tossed into a canyon. I watched her lips press into a hard line. She wasn't angry. She was tired of patching together her own history with scraps that never fit. You didn't protect me, she said, barely above a whisper. You protected the version of life you thought I should have. I didn't have an answer for that, and maybe that silence said more than anything else ever could. She stood slowly, without a word. Not with anger, just that heavy sort of resignation you can feel even before it arrives. Her hand brushed the doorknob, and for a second she paused. I waited. Maybe she'd turn. Maybe she'd ask me something, anything, that would let me try again. But she didn't. The door didn't slam. It clicked shut so gently it was almost kind. But that sound, that little final click, it lives in my chest now. It echoes in the quiet of my mornings, in the space where her voice used to be. The room was dim, lit only by the flicker of the muted TV, playing scenes no one was watching. Outside, the wind shook the last few stubborn leaves from the trees. Inside, everything was still and gone. She left, and I stayed behind with everything I never said fast enough. I didn't come in there to reminisce. I just wanted to tidy up, make space for whatever came next. She'd been gone a few months, off in her new apartment, learning how to be her own person. The drawers still held t-shirts too small and socks without pairs. I folded them, one by one, more carefully than I meant to. The light from the window caught the dust, turning it into soft gold that floated between breaths. The room still smelled like her, lavender shampoo, worn cotton, and that hint of pencil shavings from years of homework and doodles. It stopped me. Just for a second. I looked toward the door, half expecting it to open, half hoping to hear her yell, "Mom!" like she had so many times before. But it didn't, and she didn't. I kept folding, slowly now, as if the clothes could still feel something. The drawer stuck a little. It always had, one of those bottom ones with a loose track that made it tilt to the left. I gave it a tug, and it opened with a tired groan. Inside was mostly what I expected: old notebooks, a few crumpled receipts, a bent picture frame. But tucked flat beneath one of the journals was an envelope. No stamp, just a name written in her unmistakable handwriting. Dad. I hadn't heard that word in years. Not out loud. Not since the night I told her the truth. My hands paused, hovering above it. Something about it felt private, sacred. But I picked it up anyway, careful like I was holding something breakable. And I opened it. My fingers felt too old, too big, like they didn't belong touching this. The paper was warm from the sunlight, but it made my skin feel cold. Still, I read it. She didn't cross anything out. That was the first thing I noticed. No edits, no hesitation. Just her handwriting, bold and neat, stretching down the page. She wrote about being little, about waiting for letters on her birthday, about telling herself he was busy. She talked about seeing other girls with their dads at school plays and wondering what she had done wrong. Each word landed like a raindrop that had waited years to fall. She asked questions. Did you miss me? Did you think about me? Do you even remember the sound of my name? And then, I needed you, and you didn't come. I sat there, reading the ache she had poured into the spaces I never could fill. I had tried. God, I had tried to be enough. To patch the hole he left behind with lullabies and packed lunches and late-night laundry, but this wasn't about me. Not this letter. This was her grief. Unspoken, unopened, and aching in black ink. And I finally saw it for what it was. There was no date, no envelope seal, just one page, folded neatly. Maybe she had planned to send it once. Maybe she thought better of it. Or maybe she wanted me to find it all along. I held it to my chest. It felt like both a wound and a confession, hers and mine. I remembered the way she used to press drawings into my hands when she was small, without words. Maybe this was just another one of those offerings, wrapped in pain instead of crayons. I had carried her anger all these years like a punishment. But as I sat there with that letter pressed to my heart, I realized some of that anger didn't belong to me. Some of it belonged to a man who vanished without a goodbye. And the silence he left behind. I sat down on the edge of her bed, the same one I used to tuck her into night after night. The comforter still had creases from her knees. The wall by the closet still bore the faint outline of where her bookshelf used to be. A stuffed bear with a button eye missing sat in the corner, slouched over like he'd been waiting for her too. I didn't cry, not yet. I just sat, breathing in a way that hurts. The room felt smaller than I remembered, not from size, but from knowing, from finally understanding what had been echoing between us all these years. She hadn't been angry at me alone. She had been grieving him, quietly, completely, and all by herself. I woke early that morning, the kind of early life that comes not from habit, but from hope. I baked the yellow cake from memory, her favorite when she was little, with the whipped frosting she used to scoop straight from the bowl with her fingers. I didn't invite anyone, just set one plate, one fork, lit a single candle. The kitchen was dim, the snow outside casting a pale gray across the counter. I sat quietly, waiting for the phone to ring. It didn't. The candle flickered in the silence, then went out on its own. I leaned forward, placed my hand near the warm wax, and whispered her name. That was all. No singing, no slicing, no call, just a mother sitting at a kitchen table, mourning the sound of a daughter's voice she used to hear without asking. Some silences don't scream. They just weigh you down until you forget how light feels. I filled every calendar square I could find. Bake sale on Tuesday, choir rehearsal Thursday, food pantry Saturday. I signed up for casseroles I didn't even like making. Nobody asked me to be that busy. They probably wondered what had gotten into me. But I needed the rhythm. I needed the motion. It kept the ache from settling too deep. The church kitchen always smelled like cinnamon and clove this time of year. Warm, familiar. I held on to that, scent the way you hold on to a railing in a storm, because sometimes the only way to keep from crying is to keep moving. I always paused when the doorbell rang. No matter what I was doing, chopping vegetables, folding towels, I'd stop. My heart would leap, fast and full, like it was 20 years younger. I'd smooth my sweater, glance in the mirror near the hallway, then peek through the curtain. Always the same routine, always a flicker of hope. But it was never her, just a neighbor dropping off mail by mistake. A package from a catalog I forgot I ordered. Sometimes a teenager selling something I didn't need. And still, I kept hoping, because even false hope has a heartbeat, and I'd rather feel something foolish than feel nothing at all. Some nights, I'd stand at the window with a mug of tea cupped in both hands. The steam fogged the glass, but I could still see the snow glowing under the streetlights. I didn't talk out loud, not really, but I spoke to her in my mind, told her about the weather, about the casserole I burned, about the way her old blanket still smelled like lavender. I pictured her as a little girl again, bare feet on the linoleum, knees scraped, hair tangled, from sleep. In those quiet moments, I said everything I couldn't say when it mattered. In the dark, my voice didn't carry far, but my love always did. It never needed words. You don't notice loneliness at first. It slips in slowly, like dust, in the corners. You vacuum, you sweep, but it still finds a way to settle. I folded laundry that no one asked for, washed sheets no one would sleep in. I dusted behind picture frames, straightened throw pillows that no longer slouched. The house was quiet, but not empty. It was full of things left behind, socks missing their match, photos yellowing gently, memories clinging to doorknobs and drawers. I wore my loneliness like an old sweater, not because I liked it, but because it fits. And after a while, I forgot how cold it really was. I knew that knock wasn't hers. You don't forget your child's rhythm, the way they used to tap a door like it belonged to them. This one was softer, slower, like whoever stood there wasn't sure they should be. I opened it to find my neighbor's daughter, Allie, I think, smiling the kind of smile people wear when they're about to hand you something complicated. "Your daughter's having a baby," she said, pulling a pastel envelope from behind her back. I froze. Not because I didn't hear her, but because I did. "She's having a shower next weekend," she added, like it would soften the first part. She placed the envelope gently in my hand and left without waiting for a response. I stood there in the doorway, breeze sneaking in through the open kitchen window, carrying the scent of wet grass and something freshly washed. I didn't feel joy. I felt the air leave the room. I sat at the kitchen table, fingers resting on the envelope like it might warm with meaning. Her name was there. So was mine. Typed neatly on a square of heavy paper, stiff and unbending. There was no handwriting, no "Hi, Mom," no note in the margins with her familiar swirl of letters. Just a time. A date, a color scheme. Soft peach and cloud white. I ran my fingers over the letters, hoping they'd speak to me. But they didn't. They were just cold, clean, correct. I looked at the rest of the morning mail. Coupons, a circular, a bank statement I didn't need to open. This invitation was the only thing I truly saw. I hadn't been called. I had been included. And sometimes that's a much lonelier thing. The stroller she'd circled months ago still lived in the back of my mind. Page 14 of some glossy catalog she left behind the last time she came to drop off mail without speaking. I found it in the store, sleek, soft gray, with buttons I couldn't figure out. I wrapped it in pale blue paper, chose a white satin ribbon, because her registry mentioned clouds and sky, and in the middle of the baby aisle, somewhere between the bibs and the tiny socks, I started to cry. No warning. Just tears. A woman walked by, pushing a cart full of diapers. She didn't stop. I didn't want her to. My hands suddenly felt older than the gift I was holding. Wrapping paper crinkled under fingers that had soothed fevers and folded onesies of their own decades ago. It hit me then. She was going to be a mother, and I hadn't been part of any of it. I packed slowly, tissue paper layered neatly, bubble wrap around the frame, just in case. I tucked the card inside the gift bag, then zipped up the suitcase I'd only ever used for weddings and funerals. I checked the address again, then again. just to be sure. And then, without even thinking about it, I reached into the drawer near my tea tin and pulled out the photo, her at 6 months old, in a yellow sleeper, laughing at nothing in particular. I slid it between the folds of a blanket. I didn't know if I'd give it to her. Maybe I just needed it near. I wasn't sure what I was walking into, if she'd speak, if I'd matter. But I packed something else too, quiet, deliberate. I packed grace. Because sometimes that's the only thing you get to carry when history hasn't made space for healing. As I stepped out onto the porch, the morning sun was almost too bright. Everything looked too clean, too cheerful. The sky was a clear, cloudless blue, like it hadn't been holding any of the ache I felt in my chest. The stroller sat wrapped in the trunk, ribbon tied in a perfect bow. I double-checked it, even though I'd already checked it twice. Before I slid into the driver's seat, I stood for a moment, listened to the birds, the distant hum of traffic, the hush of my own breath. Just show up, I whispered to myself. That's all. Not for praise, not for a reunion, just for love. Because real love doesn't wait to be asked, it shows up. Even when the invitation comes in silence. Even when the seat at the table is uncertain. I didn't know what would happen that day, but I knew I was going anyway, and sometimes that's everything. I stood in front of the mirror longer than I should have. My hands trembled a bit as I tucked my blouse, the one she once said brought out my eyes, into a skirt I hadn't worn in years. I pinned my hair back, the way she used to like it when she was younger. The air smelled like new blossoms and sugared lemonade as I stepped through the side gate. The backyard was lovely. Streamers swayed like soft breaths. Sunflowers in glass jars lined the tables, and pastel napkins fluttered like they were too shy to settle. I paused just before entering. Guests were already gathering, birdsong woven between their chatter. I clutched the gift bag tighter than I needed to. The breeze caught the edge of my sleeve and made it feel like a hand urging me forward. Still, I stood there, just outside the moment, trying to remember why I came. She looked beautiful. She moved through the crowd like sunlight, warm, familiar, unreachable. Laughing with her in-laws, she posed for photos beside her husband's mother, her hand resting gently on the woman's back like they'd always belonged to each other. I stood near the drink table, close enough to hear the jokes, far enough to not be asked to join. I clapped when everyone clapped, sipped lemonade that had gone warm in my cup. She barely glanced in my direction, not even when she walked past the cupcake tray, the same one I had baked for her last year. Every swirl of frosting done with care. I wondered if she remembered, or if that memory had been tucked away with the others, replaced by newer, shinier ones. Her smile never reached me. It belonged to everyone else. I approached her slowly, both hands on the handle of the wrapped stroller. The ribbon I had tied it twice that morning. White satin, the same color as the onesie she wore in her first baby photo. I held it out, the way I used to hold out birthday cakes, carefully, hopefully. She took it without meeting my eyes. No smile, no thank you, just fingers brushing mine with the briefness of obligation. It wasn't rejection, but it wasn't welcome either. I kept my smile in place, not because I felt it, but because sometimes love isn't about what we receive. It's about showing up anyway, even when your gift is just another box on a table full of better wrapped ones. Her voice came sharp, loud enough to cut through the spring air. Why are you even here? Everything stopped. The laughter died mid-sentence. The music from the speaker played on, too cheerful, too loud for the silence that followed. A fork clinked against a plate. A balloon bobbed, then stilled. I didn't know where to look. At her? At the grass? At the guests whose faces turned away. So quickly, I couldn't tell if they were embarrassed for me or afraid it might happen to them. I opened my mouth, but nothing came. My breath felt tight in my chest, like I had swallowed all the air in the world and still couldn't breathe. She stood, belly round beneath her pastel dress, eyes hard. Her hand rested on her hip, like she'd been waiting to ask that question all day. I wanted to answer. I wanted to explain. But I couldn't move. Everyone saw. Everyone heard. And this time, I couldn't pretend it didn't hurt. I should have said something. Anything. But my throat felt packed with sand. The breeze cooled as a few clouds drifted across the sun, casting a pale shadow over the lawn. I stood there, stuck between the gift table and the eyes that quickly turned elsewhere. Even the balloons seemed to pause in the air, like they were holding their breath too. I didn't cry. Not yet. But I felt it. That shrinking inside, the way a child might shrink into the folds of their coat when scolded in public. I felt myself folding inward, trying to become invisible without actually leaving. It's a strange thing, to want to disappear while still wishing someone would notice you're there. I straightened my shoulders, fixed the strap of my purse, nodded like everything was fine. It wasn't. But I smiled at a woman I didn't know, who looked at me like she might say something kind. I smiled so she wouldn't. I couldn't let her see how much I wanted to cry. Not here. Not now. I walked to the edge of the yard, hands empty, heart heavy. The scent of trampled grass and leftover cake clung to the breeze. Somewhere behind me, a balloon slipped loose, drifting upward in lazy circles. Grace doesn't always speak. Sometimes. It just walks away quietly. The hallway smelled like old carpet and someone else's dinner, something garlicky and burnt. My coat was still wet from the rain, clinging to my arms like regret. I stood outside her door, staring at the faded number like it might change into a welcome sign if I looked long enough. My heart thudded in my chest, steady but unsure. My knuckles hovered just above the wood. The truth I had carried for years, tight and hidden, had finally started fluttering. It didn't feel noble. It felt scary. I knocked once, then again, softer, like an apology. The faint sound of a TV filtered through the wall behind me. Some neighbors were laughing at a show. Life going on, indifferent to the moment cracking open right here. I had rehearsed what I'd say, but now, standing there, all I could feel was the ache in my hands, the weight of everything I hadn't said, pressing down, and still, I waited. She opened the door with one hand still holding a fork. Her eyes flicked up, surprised but not shocked. Behind her, a plate of pasta sat on the coffee table, untouched and beginning to dry at the edges. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. Her face asked the question I feared most. Why now? The hallway light spilled into the doorway, catching on the curve of her cheek. I stepped inside like I was entering sacred ground, careful not to bring in too much of the outside, too much of my past. The air was warm, but tense. Baby onesies hung neatly near the heater, swaying slightly as it clicked on. The scent of formula and fabric softener mixed with something old, garlic bread maybe, now forgotten and cold. She didn't offer a seat, and I didn't ask. I just stood there, coat damp, heart exposed, breath slow. Some moments stretch out longer than they should. This was one of them.